So Graham here from Fat Tyres and Tubes, and unfortunately we've got our first puncture on our very own Duke's Electras. It's been 2 years since I fitted these tyres to my bike, and they've done a fantastic job of keeping all the glass and the other crap out, but unfortunately I think I ran over something earlier today which has finally popped it. We're going to take a look, we'll flip it upside down and we'll get the tyre off, okay? So, got the bike upside down, so we'll look and see what we can find to see what's caused this puncture. The tyre's looking very good though, so it's been on there for 2 years. Overall, here we go. A massive screw, so can I blame these fantastic tyres from finally getting punctured? Let's see how big this thing is. Look, how big this is. Yeah, in all fairness, there probably isn't a tyre in the country that would have stopped that from going through. Left a bit of a hole, but we reckon that'll probably heal itself. The rubber tends to sit around. Anyway, what I'm going to do is we'll get the tyre off, and then we'll show you how to fix these and replace one of our Duke's tyres. So whenever you're taking these off, first thing, obviously remove your plastic caps. You don't want to be trying to unscrew them through there. You'll just ruin a perfectly good, very nice plastic cap. When you're working on these electric bikes as well, you do have to be quite careful with the electronics, especially the ones around the motor and stuff like that. They're not really designed for being too brutally worked on. You can see the pins on there are quite small and narrow and whatnot. So you just put that to one side. This comes off with the rest of the motor. I'll leave that plastic cap on there, but just be careful. One of the biggest causes of damage and failure with these things, and you can kind of see it happening in this one here, is this metal frame here is supposed to be fitting over that there, so that is to protect the cable from going from damaging the from getting damaged against the steel work around here. So you've got a couple of parts that all kind of work together to try and protect it, and one of the big points there is trying to keep that metal frame over the side of it there. You can see how this could all really quite fall apart quite easily, but as long as you're careful with it, at least it does tend to fare better, let's say. So we'll leave that there. We might tape this up actually just to make sure it stays on afterwards, but yeah, let's get the wheel off first, just that chain as well in the process. Okay, so when it comes to changing these, normally, because of how tight inner tubes are on rims, people find changing normal bike tyres quite difficult. But on these, you'll find that you can actually do it by hand. Fat tyres are notorious really for this. Well, I say notorious, but if you do have a puncture whilst you're riding a fat tyre, you can find that it's quite difficult to replace. Well, you can't go any further on it, basically, is probably the best way of saying it. You know, because the tyre folds in on itself, so if you get a puncture on a fat tyre out on a ride, not only have you got a heavy bike to deal with, but you've also got a tyre that you basically have to lift off of the ground, because otherwise it gets trapped in your mudguard. So there we go. We'll take a look at it. It probably is recoverable, repairable. There it is. Yeah, look at the size. Okay, so a rather large hole left by that massive screw that went in it earlier. Even a patch will probably fix that, but in all honesty, when it comes to inner tubes, I don't really like So they're quite affordable. So normally better off to put another one in. And seeing as I manufacture and sell these, it would make sense to do just that. This then is our premium Duke's Tyres and Tubes CFS inner tube. Okay, been selling these now for nearly 3 years, and they're, well, obviously I'm going to say this, but I think they're the best on the market. The best quality rubber, built to high standard. We inspect them before we ship them out as well, which means that when it comes to an inner tube, you'll be hard pushed to bet something better. What makes our product unique as well, like most of our rivals put on an inner tube, we'll have an inner tube which is just a normal rubber shaft here and then a cap on top. Ours is slightly different because we use a threaded shaft like so, and then fit a captive screw on top like that. Okay, which means that when you've got a, let's say you get to the end of your once you put your tyre inside, or your inner tube inside rather, and fit this back on, basically what tends to happen is you lose your valve inside your tyre again. You've got to go and recover it and push it back out, and then you've got to push the tyre in on one side and inflate it on the other. With this, not so much of an issue because you've just got the captive nut there, and obviously as long as you screw it in right, it's absolutely fine. And when it comes to the installation of these, there is an easier and a hard way, let's say. I've always found that taking your time with it always makes a lot of sense, and then essentially when it comes to this, first thing off, take your captive nut off, otherwise you'll have a hard time pushing it through. Hold on to that. So I always find it easier to rest one side of the tyre on the inside of the one side of the wheel, sorry, on the inside of the tyre, and then push the valve through first. So get that so it's popped out a little bit. Like that, and then you want to basically tuck your inside of your tube through once you put your captive nut back on, because if you lose this, it's not the end of the world, but it's just makes holding everything in place a little bit easier. And I find when I'm fitting these, it's quite easy for you to lose because you've got so much space within the tyre. It's quite easy for you to lose the tyre and the inner tube inside, or rather the inner tube inside the tyre. The one thing I will say with these is obviously when you're putting this inside, try and keep it so that it's nice and flush. So what I do, get my hand, push it inside the tyre, make sure there's no other debris. If you've just changed out a flat inner tube for some reason, make sure there's no debris inside it. Push your tube all the way inside, spin it around. The one thing I will always say be careful with these is the one thing you don't want is a knot. So if you find that it's looped or it's knotted over for whatever reason, try and release the knot before you start inflating it. Tyre sat back on the rim again a little bit, like that. Again, as I said before, with the fat tyres, you find it can be easier. It certainly is a lot easier when it comes to squeezing the tyres onto the tube. Like so. You don't to be, you can be a little bit rough with them, depending on the type of rubber you've got, but there you go, that's back on. What we'll do, just spin that on a bit more, get it in a good spot, and then we'll get ready to inflate it. The tyre's ready to go, and I've got, quite fortunate because I've got a easy way of inflating them. Airline in the garage, so what we'll do is we'll put that on there quickly. Like so. Now, the trick to inflating these really is not necessarily to have it sat like that on the floor. Turn it on the side a little bit. Okay, I find this happens quite often with the customers. They struggle to get this so it's round, or the tyre sits on the wheel completely, or much rather in the middle basically. So there's an easy way of doing it. Obviously laying it on the side, and just when it comes to inflating fat tyres, the one tip I give a lot of people is to do it a little bit slowly. So basically let the inner tube find its own place in the tyre, okay? And you can see now that it's sitting perfectly on the rim. So you've got a little rubber, there's a little rubber bead that goes around the outside or the innermost part of the tyre, and essentially what you want to do is you want to make sure that sits in the middle of the tyre basically. And to do that, the easiest way of doing it is just take your time and inflate it slowly. And if you see it sort of not sitting quite right on there, you can just push it away and flex it out a little bit. Essentially, and what I'll do is just reseat the tyre right. Now, we're getting there with this one, so just starting to get a bit of volume in there. Now, when it comes to these tyres as well, almost all of I prefer, really, overall, okay, to have quite a bit more air in these than most people. I always find the ride to be a bit smoother. You're adding a bit of weight to it by adding a lot more air. You find that there's less, it actually adds more puncture protection. So when it comes to the fat tyres, most of the companies that we rival, so to speak, tell you to use 20 psi at most. And to be honest, at that point the tyre flexes quite a bit, and it's more likely to get a puncture because something can sit see its way into the tyre and then push through the rubber basically. But with if you have a higher pressure, then it tends to flick it away rather than absorbed into the tyre and then obviously causing a puncture. So we're not far off now. I'm just going to keep just shy of 30 psi. There we go. You'll find that basically you won't really be able to squeeze it anymore, which is kind of where you want to see. And then you can get a bit of bounce out of it as well, just to check that it's on there. Then obviously release your connection and then add your Duke's cap that you're going to put on your inner tube valve as well. Then we take his wheel and we're going to slot it back in to the slot. Now there is a bit of a technique to this, albeit there's a way that there's a little slot or a little groove that helps guide the wheel into the frame. Essentially, you just got to ensure that's in the right spot. Lift the old chain out of the way, push the thing back, drop it into the space, and then hopefully if everything's lined up correctly with the brake disc and everything, just slot straight back in. Spanners, we've got, again, you don't really want to go hard on these. Doesn't really benefit them too much. And then essentially all you need to do next is reattach your caps on the side to cover all of your mechanism, like so. Essentially put your motor connection back in where your wires are attached. give it a good spin to check it over, make sure it seats right. And that is that.